Do you think you got what it takes to build your own dream team?
And Owens with a move, and a foot race, and Owens inside the 23. Bombers won't catch him, and it's a touchdown.
We'll log in and play with the big boys.
Deep drop for Bo Mitchell, and a deep toss, and downfield, and it is just going to take it to the house.
Partnered with Fantasy.ca, Rouge Radio presents the CFL Fantasy Podcast.
Looking for Ernest Jackson, and what a touchdown.
And now your CFL Fantasy Insiders, Dave Dawson and Rob Dalton.
Fantasy Football Podcast, Episode 2. Fantasy.ca, as we can sign up your team for some CFL Fantasy Football. The new Rouge Radio, Dalton and Dave. We have our separate podcast we'll be recording on a different episode, but this one is all about CFL Fantasy Football. And yeah, you can sign up on Fantasy.ca with your friends and play real fantasy football, quite similar to the NFL product, and not like the other products are out there. I'm not going to name any names, but just so you know, there are other products out there. Right?
I'm not going to say anything. No, but I'm just going to say the boys at Fantasy.ca are exactly where it's at, and if you're not playing that, it's not too late. You can still sign up and play and feel like a true general manager.
All the way up to week 19 or 20, you can sign up, and you can go 1-0 and win the championship. That's kind of the way to do it. So we have Aaron Brown on from Fantasy.ca. I haven't had Brownie on in quite some time. Actually, I think this has been, we should have like a reunion song or something. We should have like some kind of like hallelujah on to have Aaron Brown back. Brown, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Hey guys, thanks. Great to be back.
It's been a busy summer for you, I guess. And here's what I'm thinking. You're in Regina. You haven't been able to join one of our fantasy podcasts yet, and the Riders haven't won yet. So could this be the missing link?
That could be, yeah. Maybe we'll see him turn it around this weekend. Although with the news of Kevin Glenn, that's probably less likely. But we'll see. This could be the turning point for them.
Fantasy waiver wire pickups have been going like crazy for Brett Smith. I'll guarantee that. We'll get to the ads and drops, guys to avoid, guys to keep your eye on in a little bit. But first, we'll just catch up with Mr. Brown here. And guess how's it been so far this year? I know you guys have been overwhelmed with requests, and I imagine teams are getting signed up like crazy. And what's the feedback been like so far this year?
Yeah, no, we've had a great year. Definitely biggest year so far for traffic volume and league signups. So great to see the increasing support and not just fantasy football, just but the CFL league in general. I mean, that's what we're all about is kind of promoting a younger demographic and more people getting just generally interested in the CFL. So it's been great so far.
Yeah, there's some new quirks in it as well. When we mentioned we had you on the show before the season started to talk about some of the new quirks and things like that. How's it been received? I know one thing that I like is to be able to search for a player. That's probably my favorite new wrinkle on the site.
You beat me to it. I was going to say that was my favorite because now I can search for John Delahunt and be told that he's retired.
Yeah, no, that's a great feature, and definitely had some good feedback on some of the additions like that. Team kickers, we've had some positive feedback on that as well. Not having to manage week to week who's kicking for who. So definitely some good feedback, and there's some areas where we're still definitely trying to improve too. So.
Couple questions that we've thrown out on Twitter. We mentioned that we're having Aaron on the show tonight, and a couple of things that we did receive. The first one already fixed, from what I understand, but Adrian DeCorby at DeCorb said that, is there a way to have injury updates be more accurate? Malik Jackson, Ottawa, is one that he mentioned. He's 3 weeks in while still playing, and I know you guys, obviously, there's a lot of injuries, and you have to go through those, but that one's been fixed already, right?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question and a good question. That's one area where we definitely acknowledge that we can do a little better, and it's and I'm not deferring all the blame to the CFL, but compared to the NFL, they're definitely not quite up to par with injury information and things like that. But we definitely are striving to do better there and just kind of keep a pulse on injuries a little better. But on that, I'll mention if anyone you notice a player where the status, you think the status is wrong, definitely fire us an email, send us a tweet. We'll try and get on it and respond as soon as we can.
We did have one, asking about Michael Sam. Is he in the system yet? And I kind of joked. I think he'll be on the waiver wire for most of the season. That's kind of where but no, just kidding. But are you getting requests about Michael Sam? Has he had a chance to be added into the system yet?
He's been sitting he is in our system, but I guess we kind of had him listed as not really on a defined team. So I'm going to go ahead and get that changed tonight. We'll get him on the Montreal roster since that's where he's listed on Montreal's website. So if you check him out, tonight or tomorrow, he should be available if you want him.
If you want him,
I know you'll be grabbing him. Another comment here from Ryan Maloney, at Ryan P. Maloney. He said he always thought allowing GMs to add any players to the IR would be a good solution for injury updates and things like that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's a good idea, and something we'll probably strongly consider for next year's upgrades. And I guess the retort to that was kind of always, well, then guys can just hide healthy players on their injury list. But I mean, really, I guess in the CFL that could happen too in real GM management type style. So I think it's definitely worth considering. I think in the interim, I know the receiver spot was kind of a common area where that would be a nice thing to have. So I think maybe a suggestion to tide us over into next season would be maybe just to increase the bench size on the receiver to one more, because I mean really that's what you're doing by allowing a GM to place a healthy receiver on IR. You're just making your roster bigger in a roundabout way. But yeah, definitely something we want to look at for next season, I think, for sure.
Another question here from Corey Winoble, I believe I pronounced his name right, at LB Safety. Can they set up a notification this is a good question, for the commish when a trade needs approval? Is there any way of doing that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't see that one. I'll look into that. That's something that I thought I guess it's just a notification when they sign in, but email capabilities, that's something that we can look into as well. That one might be an easier one to implement, so maybe I'll bug Cook about that and see what kind of backlog he has for upgrades this year, because that seems like one we could maybe implement kind of without rewiring a bunch of stuff. So that's a good one.
See, these are the kind of questions that it doesn't hurt to ask. Nobody thinks about asking them because they, it's like all about apathy. They always think that someone else is going to ask that question, and sure enough, all it takes is one person, and it's going to get it done at least.
Yeah, for sure.
And the thing is about continually getting that feedback, making the product better. I think the product is already fantastic, and some of those things are great. Brownie, nice easy one here for you. How do you go about setting up the playoffs after week 14 regular season? 7 teams, 4 qualify for playoffs. I think that'll be a nice easy one for you, setting up from Joe Pritchard at USFL Tecmo.
Yeah, so essentially when you want to start your playoffs, it's a function in the commissioner panel, commissioner settings, and you essentially get to pick which week you want to start, and you can customize, every week thereafter you can customize matchups. So we kind of placed a little more control into the commissioner's hands to that whole kind of aspect of the game, and it's just really to account for the most amount of flexibility and customization. So go to the commissioner panel, find it there. There should be an FAQ kind of section on there if you need a little further walkthrough on that, but that's where you'll find that feature.
One thing that I think we've really enjoyed, and Dalton and I in our league this year, is we've been using the waiver budget to be able to police the waiver wire pickups. I know sometimes guys wait. Oh, cool, the week's been finalized, go and add players, but having the waiver budget's been fantastic, being able to put money on guys, et cetera. So I think we've really enjoyed that. Yeah,
I'm in a few leagues, and it's always a riot and a race here when you see a player that, maybe a sleeper that has a really good weekend. It's always fun to go on the bidding war, and everyone's kind of waiting until the 12th hour there, or 11th hour to try and steal them on the final bid. It's been one we've enjoyed too a lot.
Aaron, I'll ask you, I guess, about this probably, more than anything, might be something that people encounter, but they might not bring it up, and if they do, it's got to be hard for you guys to police. So, for instance, there are a number of players who swap positions continually, and it's probably difficult for you guys to keep up. For instance, Keon Raymond has gone back and forth between playing defensive back to linebacker. He's listed as a defensive back. Do you encounter a lot of those questions, and then how do you police those?
We definitely get that a couple times a year at least, and I guess what we kind of decided at the beginning of the season, we kind of committed to whatever that player is listed at, right before game one. That's where we're going to keep him, and the reason for that is if we're constantly changing it back and forth throughout the season, it's going to result in people's rosters becoming invalid, and then we get a lot of concerns that way as well. I guess the feature that we kind of implemented to try to help combat that was flex D positions, which I know some people don't like, but it's kind of the one way to maybe battle that whole issue would be my suggestion to try that out.
Absolutely. Now, I guess my question for you, can you make that change in the middle of a season? For instance, like if your roster is set up for 6 receivers, 3 defensive backs, can you add a flex position in the middle of the season?
Yes. Yep. You definitely can.
Perfect. So that's a great way to avoid that.
Yep.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, exactly. Midstream, you can change it to flex D or add another linebacker, add more receivers, or whatever you like. Midstream season, that won't be an issue at all.
Daltz, I know you and I probably appreciate that, and it's been discussed in our league that linebackers are a little thin just due to the way that some of the positions are transitioned. But if you're facing that, you're listening to this, and you're facing that, that's a definite alternative. Is that a flex position? And I think we might even jump on that heading into this week. So.
Yeah, especially with injuries and guys playing DB that can play the middle linebacker or the weak side linebacker in case, if you're a Bomber fan, you know all about that with Chris Randall, with guys like you mentioned Keon Raymond who are...
Connor Ellsworth was another.
Yeah, exactly. Those guys that could play multiple, positions on the defensive front. And this new thing could definitely help you out.
And even injuries aside too, I've found that it's helpful even with managing bye weeks and having some weeks if you front loaded on a particular team and they're on a bye week, sometimes you're kind of scrambling for options. So having that flex option, I think helps manage the bye weeks a little better too.
Although that also helps if you're paying attention. I accidentally almost dressed Henry Burris.
Yeah. You also left Charleston Hughes on your bench and you lost by 25, so you could have won last week too, but anyway, that kind of stuff happens. Hey, I left Eric Rogers on my bench 2 weeks ago and I lost, but anyway, so no, that's a great suggestion. I know there are teams in our league that are top heavy on Saskatchewan Roughriders, as there are many across Western Canada, which may change in the coming weeks here. So, Aaron, I guess best question. One question we did get on Twitter is if you do see anything that people want to make suggestions or questions, what's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
Well, the best way for me, anyways, is just to go on. If you're on Twitter, just give us a tweet. It's at Fantasay, FANTASEH. Alternatively, you can send us an email. There's inquiry@fantasay.ca. Would be the best spot for just general player inquiries. But usually we're pretty quick on either one of those avenues. Myself, I'm usually the one addressing any stuff on Twitter, and one of my colleagues does most of the email stuff. So either way, we'll do our best to get you a quick answer.
Well, and they definitely can help you with adding the wrong people onto your starting lineup when you should have had them, or on your bench and you should have had them in your starting lineup. So, but anyway, thanks, Aaron. Appreciate that. And in the coming weeks, sounds like we'll be getting some stats on guys who are trends that we're seeing in the league, ads and drops and things like that. So excited to hear more from you in the future, my friend.
Yeah, you bet. I hope to be on definitely again in the near future, and then we'll dive a little more into some stats and figures like that.
And I guess one quick thing before we go, did we talk about the live stats? That link is being fixed to this weekend, right?
Yeah, we've been kind of in a transition mode, switching suppliers or vendors for that, and it's looking like we should have the thing up and running, kind of our wrinkles ironed out by this weekend. So definitely you'll be getting free live stats this weekend. Next weekend is where we'll probably be looking to collect payment, and again, consistent with last year, I think $4.99, $5 for the season works out to, I don't know, I think I calculated back to about 8 cents per game or something like that. So
That's definitely affordable. I think that's how much Riders tickets should be selling for by week 14. Oh, just kidding. But anyway, Brown, thanks for your time, man. Look forward to having you on again in the future.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, Fantasy.ca is the place to sign up your team, and we've been getting quite a few questions from Fantasy.ca users as well as the TSN Fantasy Football users, and we'll get to some of those questions right away. We also have some of your drops, ads, guys to avoid. But first, I think, in good Nostradamus fashion, I know what we haven't done in the past is celebrate our successes, and we've been challenged by that in recent weeks to kind of toot our own horn a little bit and things that we've done well. And I know that yourself and myself, being a couple of good, humble Winnipeggers, Winnipeggers tend not to brag about things. Hashtag swag.
Hashtag 444.
Hashtag 444, which we will get to on our other podcast, which you will not want to miss, by the way, our new Rouge Radio podcast after this gets posted and recorded. But I think one thing that we need to do in the future from now on is celebrate some of the things that we've done well in the past. So on our last fantasy football show, this is only our second one of the year, but a couple of things that we got to talk about right off the hop. So, guys, we said to avoid Damon Washington. What has he done? Getting beat for touchdowns. Sam Hurl. What has he done? Nothing. He keeps getting dropped. Anthony Allen. What has he done? Nothing. Jerome Messam took his job. Taj Smith, gone for the year. Chris Getzlaff has been very ineffective. Jeff Fuller has not been well since we had that show, and Chad Simpson is on the practice roster. Those were all the guys that we said to avoid in our last show, adults. Let's give ourselves a round of applause.
Well, I'm patting myself on the back right now, and to be honest with you, I don't remember all that, so I'll take your word for it. I think after we recorded that, I was in full vacation mode, so I completely forgot everything that we talked about.
Yeah, including your pants in Florida. Guys that we said to keep your eyes on were John Cornish, just because of his injury tendencies. And yes, I know a thumb injury is far from a concussion, but hey,
for 6 weeks, yeah.
If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, I'm just saying. Darius Bowman, we said to keep your eye on because his play will probably go downhill a little bit. Sure enough, there you go. Chris Williams, we said will have a breakout game. Yeah, he did okay last week. Guys that we said will start slow but heat up. Defensive end Alex Hall for the Riders. Yep, had a pretty good game last week. And Cord Parks turned a corner. He's been looking good as well. So there you go. You're welcome. If you're skeptical of our fantasy football knowledge, we, from now on, we'll celebrate and brag when we do things right, because that's what you, the listener, has requested, that we brag and brag. Because, I don't know, it's kind of lame, but we'll do it anyway.
We're going to do it anyway, yeah.
We're going to do it anyway, and you have nothing to say about it. Okay, into this week's ads and drops. First of all, the lineup changes to get to. Luke Tasker looks like he's back in the lineup for the Hamilton Ticats. That's a big addition in the receiving core. And I imagine Tiquan Underwood will probably be the sacrificial lamb at that wide receiver position. Eric Norwood is back in for the Ticats. Sam Scott has been released. Alouettes' Fred Stamps is out. Dobson Collins is in, and adults, don't be running to the waiver wires to grab Dobson Collins, right?
No, because if Dobson Collins by himself is not worthy of a waiver wire requirement, but he's only going to be on there short term. But as soon as Fred Stamps gets back up and healthy and gets everything all up in order to return, so yeah, I mean, if you're running to grab Dobson Collins, you've got issues to begin with.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a few minutes here, because I got a challenge out there to you, those who run and grab. Yeah, Fred Stamps, personal reasons. It sounds like he's missing. He missed practice this week, a few days. He'll likely be back next week. Nick Moore is out for the Bombers, as we did mention off the top, our first fantasy football broadcast of the year. A podcast that Nick Moore is a guy to keep your eye on because of what? Injury concerns.
Yeah, it's too bad that he got the one great game, his first touchdown as a Bomber in Week 1, slowly sliding downhill, even though he still remains the top leading receiver on the Bombers roster. However, having said that, the quarterbacking issues with Drew Willie's injury history, as well as Brian Brom throwing to other teams rather than his own receivers. Yeah, you might want to think about throwing Nick Moore to the Wolves and maybe benching him, or if you could find a suitable taker for him, do that even better.
It's not a bad idea. Bombers, Greg Peach on the 6th game, Brian Turner on the 6th game as well. And Brian Turner really never was very healthy coming out of camp, and Greg Peach, unfortunate for him, his whole career has just battled injuries. Guys, you should be adding in the next couple of weeks here. I like Jasper Jr. He's listed as Jasper Collins in the Fantasy.ca system, but he likes to be called Junior Collins, and he was anything but junior. He was big in the last game for the Ticats.
Yeah, I mean, he almost became, other than Andy Fantuz in the latter stages of that game, he almost became Zach Collaros' number one target, or at least his first read. This is the guy that's coming off his first game, his first touchdown catch. Will he continue it? I know it was against the Saskatchewan Roughriders defense that has more holes than, I'm not going to go to that $2
joke somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. You cut me off before I can go that far. But, will he continue this, or will momentum keep forward, or is this going to be one of those one-hit wonder kind of situations? Well, only time will tell. It's worthy of keeping him on your roster if you have him, but, rest easy. Don't, as I said a couple of weeks ago, I'm skeptical of you running to the waiver wire and adding him.
Oh, boy.
I've got to bring that word again.
There's that word again. Hashtag skeptical. He'll be playing probably behind Luke Tasker, who's back in the lineup this weekend. A guy you can add. Keep an eye on. I don't imagine dressing him this weekend, but keep an eye on for the future is Troy Harrison, running back for the Calgary Stampeders. Matt Walter will be seeing a bulk of the carries, and Tim Brown will be a feature back as well. But I imagine Troy Harrison will get a good look. You look at last year, with they brought in Martel Mallett and Jonathan Williams before he ended up going off to the Red Blacks, and the Stampeders did look at a few options there. So Troy Harrison is one that you can look at for the Calgary Stampeders. TJ Lee in BC secondary. TJ Lee was a guy that we featured off the top this year in our fantasy football preview show. He's a guy that I expected to have a big year. Bit of a slow start. Looks like now he's coming into his own. TJ Lee's a guy I would have my eye on, and one I know Dalton and I are both a fan of, who's finally back, healthy, and on the roster, listed as third on the depth chart, in behind Shaquille Murray-Lawrence for BC tomorrow.
Yeah, Keola Antolin, he was a guy that we had our eye on even in exhibition, and when he had some opportunities, he took advantage of it and got me some fantasy points. And if he's going to get the opportunity this year, it's going to be hard in that George Cortez offense if he gets the opportunity, because Andrew Harris is having one heck of a season thus far. But just keep him on the back burner. If he's available, grab him. May not want to start him, but at least keep him on your roster, because when he is playing, he will rack up some points for you.
You never know. And, if they put Shaquille Murray-Lawrence maybe returning kicks and they feature Keola Antolin, quite possibly he could have some touches. But, yeah, again, don't be running and grabbing him. But something, if you're in a pretty deep running back league, Keola Antolin is a guy that I would look at grabbing and putting on your bench right now. AC Leonard, he's been cool. Turning up the heat. See what I did there? I know that joke's been so overused, but he's been looking good in the BC receiving corps, been a favorite target for Travis Lulay, and one that I think that obviously has probably already been added at the extreme level over the past couple of weeks, but I think he's just going to get better and better.
Yeah, he's one of those guys where, yes, he's having a good week, or at least he had a good week. Again, this is one of those things where you just have to remain skeptical. I know that's that word, but you really do have to remain and have that emotion with a guy like this who had the game that he did against a defense like the Saskatchewan Roughriders. It's a little bit of a little bit of the same opposition in Winnipeg as far as their defense goes, but Winnipeg's defense is a little bit underrated considering how horrible their offense has been in the last couple of weeks. But with that being said, you kind of want to have this guy in your back of your mind as far as when you have the opportunity to add in a receiver. If you're not deep at receiver, this is a good guy that you want to get, because he does look like that he's going to be number one target of one Mr. Lulay.
And if you're in a PPR league like we are, I think that's a pretty good one as well, because you'll get 6-7 catches a game. Some of them might not be for big yards, but again, if you're in a deep receiver league, AC Leonard is a guy to grab. But Travis Brown, middle linebacker for the Ottawa Red Blacks, his six-game sentence is almost over. He should be back in the lineup very soon. And oh boy, do the Red Blacks ever have some questions coming up in regarding what they're going to do with guys coming off the sixth game, especially receivers. We'll get to that in a sec, though. Another guy to add, Tyree Hollins in Saskatchewan, defensive back. He's one of the only defensive backs in Saskatchewan making tackles right now. So he's probably a guy that you want to pick up.
Yeah, I mean he's a sure tackler, and we make fun of the defense over in Saskatchewan being horrible, but they're not giving up big gains. So you know that the defensive side is going to get a tackle or two. So if you really want some very high points per game, yeah, you grab into Saskatchewan. Defensive back is the sure way to get that, because there's going to be a hell of a lot of tackles on that side.
Basically, grab the fastest Saskatchewan defensive back you can, because anybody who's got the ball, you know who's going to beat 9 of their defenders, and it's one of the remaining defenders who's going to tackle him. Tyree Hollins has been a guy who's been around the ball. And Bill, to let you go off on this last guy, replacing Nick Moore into the receiving corps for the Bombers. What do you like about that young man?
Well, I like Justin Velton because he's a shifty runner, he's a shifty receiver, and he may be used as a punt return. We saw what he did against Saskatchewan in week 1. He took one all the way back, albeit he was called back on a holding penalty. But this is a guy that's probably going to give Drew Willie another guy on the short side of, he's going to play in the slot back as well as he likes playing the wide side of the field. So he's going to be that deep threat that Willie likes to use on occasion.
Guys you want to avoid. We only got 3 in here, and I know Daltz is a little... What? Hashtag skeptical on one of them. We'll start off with a guy in Calgary. Marquay McDaniel used to be such a heavy target of many quarterbacks. Kevin Glenn, probably one of his best friends in the league, and I think Marquay McDaniel in red, white, and black. Not a guy I want to be holding on high priority of the top 3 receivers on my depth chart, because of you got a guy named Eric Rogers on your roster. Even Anthony Parker is really coming into his own as well. And it's only going to get deeper and deeper, as Jeff Fuller is another option before. I mean, Daltz, I can think of 5 targets that Bo Levi Mitchell sees before he sees Marquay McDaniel. He's a guy that I think you'll want to avoid, and if you got him, trade him.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting scenario in Calgary, just because their offense is not really... it's not running on all 4 cylinders that we've been known or been accustomed to in the last couple of years. So it's just adding to the snowball effect over in Calgary on the offensive side. Is that Marquay McDaniel, he's not exactly his number 1 or 2 receiver, but at the same side, Bo Levi has actually been struggling this year as compared to the Bo Levi that we expected to. So I'd love to hang on to him. But, yeah, I'd be quick to avoid a guy like Marquay McDaniel, just the way how he's falling out of favor in the eyes of Bo Levi.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, when you set such a high bar like BLM did, when he's becoming average, people are skeptical and say, what's wrong with Bo Levi Mitchell? Well, he's human. More than anything else. And one that I would say, right now, maybe not avoid. He's had a slow start, but Daltz feels he may have a big game against the Bombers on Thursday. And that is none other than Alex Bazzie of the BC Lions.
Yeah, I think if you throw into the fact that maybe Willie is not 100%, he is 1 hit away from Brian Brom throwing 1,100,000 pick sixes in that game, and with the fact that
how you really feel,
and with the fact that he's going to be probably holding on to the ball, not wanting to screw up, he's going to hold on the ball at least that 1 second longer than he needs to be, especially in that Marcel Belfait offense. But don't get me started on that. You know what Alex Bazzie is? He's starting to get up there right now as far as in the sack totals. You could tell that his motor is running. He's getting his confidence going in this year. And to be honest with you, if Brian Brom ends up playing, watch how Alex Bazzie could end up loading up on his sack totals.
Tell us how you really feel. One last guy to avoid is Terrell Sinkfield in Hamilton. I just continually get disappointed by this guy. Every time, we go back to Chris Cuthbert when we had him on the show last year to preview the Toronto Argonauts, and he mentioned Terrell Sinkfield as a guy that he would have a breakout year, which he did, but then ran into issues. I'm not sure if it's an attitude problem or whatever, but young. And Terrell Sinkfield's a guy that I think, being benched last week in favor of Junior Collins, I don't think Terrell Sinkfield's going to be seeing a lot of field in the coming weeks.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one guy that when I'm looking at the Hamilton receiving core, to be honest with you, Terrell Sinkfield, he's a great player. Honestly, does not show up on my radar. He should, but he doesn't, and I think that's one reason. I think if you're going to ask me which receiver in Hamilton should I drop, yeah, it's got to be Sinkfield.
Yeah, the field is sinking around him, and I like Bakari Grant's bounce back year. I think it's nice to see him doing well again. I know you and I both agree on that. So, with looks like Terrence Tolliver will be on one side, and then Luke Tasker. I imagine Junior Collins in behind him. Sinkfield probably riding it out again, and Quincy McDuffie is a guy that they'll probably draw back into the lineup, I imagine, this weekend too. All right, guys, we'll move on here quickly. Guys that I say that you could probably trade if you have them on your roster. One guy that I don't think Daltz really agrees with me either, but that's fine. We don't always have to be on the same page, is 84 in orange. But maybe this week you might have a big game.
Yeah, I think that Winnipeg's defense is a little bit underrated. I think they got left in the dark by their offense against Edmonton, although Edmonton's, it provides a different opposition. However, Emmanuel Arsenault, yeah, he hasn't been performing like the Manny show that we've known to lug, and I said this about Bo Levi Mitchell, but this is true. This is a guy that may not be Lule's number one target any longer, but he's a guy that you should at least hold on for at least one more week, because that Winnipeg secondary and that defense is kind of iffy on that one side. So if you're looking to at least to grab someone, if you don't have any BC Lions offense or as far as receiver, Emmanuel Arsenault is a guy that you could grab if you have him. At least keep him around for one more week.
Yeah, sell high, I think, is what Daltz probably was saying there. Through all that, is he'll have a big game, and then probably sell him. Jeff Fuller is another guy, say, in Calgary. We spoke about him earlier on in the year, and it's going back to the tooting our own horn back in 2013, predicting Jeff Fuller would explode the league, and he did. But I think one thing that you are seeing tendencies out of Mr. Fuller, number one, injury prone. Number two, with Eric Rogers in the lineup, he's going to get a majority of the balls that Fuller has been getting. What happened when Eric Rogers came back from injury? Jeff Fuller's touches went down.
Yeah, I think this falls out to everything is like the quicksand theory, is that when one thing happens, and I'm talking about the offense in Calgary moving the ball equals, and especially with the injuries up front on their offensive line, means that the ball's spreading around to all the receivers. That's likely not to happen as much. As you mentioned, Anthony Parker's getting a little bit more touches. The focus on the running game, especially with Matt Walter and Harrison attempting to carry the ball here. So you're going to find that offense is going to be lagging, so to speak. And he'll get a couple of catches here and there, but I don't foresee him being the guy that we expected him to be this year.
Sell high, Jeff Fuller. One last guy, who's going to be on the field quite a bit over the coming weeks, but one that I've been watching, I've always liked Tyrone Brackenridge. I've always been a fan of his, the way he plays the game, his intensity. I think he's just a fun guy to watch. If you're just a pure football fan, you like big hits, Tyrone Brackenridge should be at the top of your list. But right now, Daltz, the way I'm just seeing that trend, it almost looks like quarterbacks are figuring out his safety blitz, and we're not seeing as many sacks out of Tyrone Brackenridge. It's only 1 week, so you might, don't necessarily panic, but I think in the weeks going forward, Tyrone Brackenridge might be a guy that you can sell high and be able to get a good player out of.
Well, with the news that Kevin Glenn is gone for 6 games at the least, and you got Brett Smith and possibly Tino Sunseri, I would keep Tyrone Brackenridge, because he's going to play all but 59 minutes of that game, of every freaking game, and I'm guaranteed he's going to get a tackle per minute.
Yeah, well, can you get points for missed tackles? I think that's probably the big question.
Exactly. I think that's where I was probably wanting to go, is that if you can get points for missed tackles, my God, just grab everybody that wears green.
All right, a guy to keep an eye on, and I think as we move into some questions that we did receive on Twitter about the TSN fantasy football product is Paris Cotton in Winnipeg. I know last week against Edmonton it was wet and he didn't have that great of a game, and you did see a little more out of Cameron Marshall. And Daltz, you did mention this at the preview show at the start of the year, that Cameron Marshall would be a guy pretty active out of the Bombers' backfield. Does it concern you, and should you be keeping an eye on Paris Cotton?
I wouldn't sell him yet until the carries in the Bomber backfield goes more than 50-50 in favor of Cam Marshall. But yeah, I think this Bomber offense, the way that I saw when I looked at it in preseason and the way training camp was looking, is that this was going to be a run-heavy offense. and it was going to be one of those thunder and lightning type. Cam Marshall's going to get a few carries, then Paris Cotton comes in with a change of pace and gives you a couple more yards or a couple more carries. We saw that in week 1. Paris Cotton was primarily the number one guy, and then Cam Marshall ran it further down the Riders' throats, although as we come to figure that out, that was against the Riders, and we haven't seen anything like that since week 1. But, these are two guys that you probably don't want to give up on either, because the carries in the Bomber backfield is probably going to stagger around 50-50 for each way.
One last thing that I need to mention, and if you're this guy, so there are different fantasy football personalities, right? There's an egomaniac like myself who finishes first in every regular season and never wins in the playoffs. There's this guy who goes and grabs every player who has a good game, regardless of who it is. Hits the waiver wire as hard as he can and grabs that guy who had a good game. So I'm just saying, spend a little more time scouting each position, and guys that, as you adults, you have mentioned in weeks past and all through our last year fantasy football program, you want to grab guys who are listed closer to the ball. The cornerbacks you want to avoid. It's the defensive halfbacks and the Sam linebackers you want to pick up. Those are the guys who will be around the ball the most. And if you're this guy who went out and grabbed Keith Sholigan because he had a sack last week, go into your bathroom right now, look in the mirror, and slap yourself in the face. Why are you grabbing Keith Sholigan? Keith Sholigan is not a fantasy football player. Keith Sholigan is a responsible football player whose name will not be mentioned on every play. He may get one tackle in a game. Keith Sholigan is not a fantasy football player. So if you went out and you picked up Keith Sholigan off the waiver wire this week, go to your bathroom, look in the mirror, and slap yourself in the face right now.
Or wherever you have mirrors. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the bathroom.
If you're in your car, I don't want to encourage distracted driving. Pull over to the side of the road and slap yourself in the face right now if you grab Keith Sholigan. Shame on you. Shame on you for grabbing Keith Sholigan off the waiver wire. But I'm saying, so don't be that guy who panics and grabs people off the wire, especially if you're in a league that limits moves. You have to pay for moves. If you're an unlimited move, that's fine. If you're on a league with a lot of guys who don't really know what they're doing, that's also safe, because you could probably afford to drop a Zach Evans or a Marcus Howard, and no one's going to know the difference. But if you're going and panicking and dropping a Tristan Opalugo or a Jamal Westerman or someone like that who has had a slow start but will turn it on, and Alex Bazzi for a Keith Sholigan, fail. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Or go ahead.
Or Spencer Moore.
Or Spencer Moore of the Riders.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I made the comment, and I'm not too sure if it was on air or off air. I made the comment about last year. Do you know how many people grabbed Aaron Kelly after his week 1 performance last year for the Bombers? It was insurmountable, the amount of people that grabbed this guy. And look what he did after that. He went completely downhill. I'm always cautious about grabbing a guy who, and this is what's great for fantasy, because it tells you what total points they have, what their average per week, and what they got last week. So that's something you have to take cautious of and look at. If you're looking at Keith Sholigan and he's got 10 points and is averaging 1 point because he had his 10 points all last week, yeah, probably not a good idea. And we're going into week 6, so we've had 5 weeks to tell. I mean, this is not going on 1 week and then going into week 2 and it's like, you know what? Keith Sholigan had a great game. I think he's going to. No, he had 5 weeks. Well, 4 because he had the bye, but he's had 4 weeks to put up all these fantasy points. And at this rate, he's going to probably give you. Well, I don't know his point totals right now. Let's say he has 10. At this rate,
I think 11.
Yeah,
or 12. It's something so minuscule. And they're on the bye week this week. So if you rush and grab Keith Sholigan, and Ottawa's heading into the bye week this week, anyway.
Yeah, Keith, you might want to pull over twice to slap yourself if you did that.
If you happen to be listening to this show, Keith, or any of the Ottawa Red Blacks team, I'm not saying Keith isn't a good football player. There's something very different about fantasy football players, and just football players. There are very good football players who will not show up on fantasy stats just because nobody ever goes, especially on the defensive side. If you're a good defensive player, you know, a prime example for me that I'm facing is Abdul Kane. He's a fantastic defensive player. He might be in consideration for top defensive player of the year this year if he keeps it up. But the problem is, when he's making defensive plays, they're pass knockdowns. A lot of them aren't tackles, right? So, you know, he's in their face, he's making knockdowns, but he's not getting tackles. A guy like Khalil Bass, he's going to make tackles, right? So, I mean, yeah, I'm not saying Keith Shulgin's not a good football player. There's a difference between good fantasy football player and good football player. Keith Shulgin is not a good fantasy football player. So anyway, enough of this harping on that poor young man. I'm sure he's a fantastic individual, but if you did grab him, you know what to do. Hey, you know what? Maybe even ask your wife to slap you. That's probably the severity of that. Don't slap yourself. Get someone else to slap you. All right, we've had some questions online. One more before we wrap things up here for the evening. The TSN Fantasy Product. We've got a question from Marc-Andre Genard at Marc Genard on Twitter. And he said, here is my lineup for week number 6. Adults, if you have it up there, do you want to go through it or shall I fire through it myself?
Yeah, I do have it on here, and look, on paper, he's got a very good squad. I love his defense. I believe that's his defense. He's got the Edmonton Eskimos. But I have questions in regarding to his receiver. He's got Weston Dressler. Now, I'm not really too familiar. He's listed under the flex position, so I'm not too familiar as to what that's referring to. However, Weston Dressler with Brett Smith and Tino Sunseri as your quarterback. Yeah, I'm highly unlikely that Weston Dressler is going to give you any fantasy points at all, especially against the Edmonton Eskimo defense.
I would imagine that Dressler will probably be the recipient of the short passing game. If there will be some deep balls, I think you're right. There'll be problems there. But I think the flex is for a running back or a receiver position. And rather running back, I know it's I'm not sure how it's valued, but 150 points there. But I don't see an Andrew Harris on the roster there. So if you can maybe throw him in as a running back this weekend, it might not be a bad idea. Or C.J. Gable, for that matter, probably could be a good spot to fill in there as well. Daltz, what about the next receivers?
Yeah, his other two receivers right now, Andy Fantuz and S.J. Green. I love those two guys because Andy Fantuz seems to be Zach Collaros' number one target when the game's on the line. We saw what he did against Saskatchewan. Again, this goes all the way back. This is Saskatchewan's defense, so I remain somewhat skeptical, but a little bit more optimistic in regarding to Fantuz and S.J. Green. This is a guy that just makes catches that nobody else can, especially with an up-and-coming quarterback like Rakeem Cato, who he happens to have on his fantasy team. So I think from top to bottom, I like this roster I'm looking at. I still do have questions regarding to Weston Dressler and even Jerome Messam. And I think Jerome Messam's probably going to average a little bit higher than normal when what the Edmonton Eskimos have been allowing in past weeks. But I still question about what kind of impact Mr. Messam's going to have against his Edmonton Eskimo D-line.
Yeah, and with Montreal coming off the bye week in Calgary, I could see S.J. Green putting up a big game there against the Calgary defense. However, the Stamps were coming off a loss, so they could be pretty fired up, especially playing at home. And if Luke Tasker is back in the lineup, he is the favorite target of Zach Collaros. That might be an option I would look at as well. And Jerome Messam, probably will see a lot of that short yardage yards. And the Eskimos defense, they're going to be keying heavily in on the run game. So Jerome Messam would be one I would maybe pull back on a little bit. Maybe a C.J. Gable or Brandon Whitaker I would potentially throw in there even as well to take a look at different options. Tyrell Sutton, potentially, but Calgary has been known to be pretty good against the run. So maybe C.J. Gable in place of Jerome Messam, I think would be a good one. Luke Tasker in favor of Andy Fantuz, and as well, the flex position, I think kicker's good, and Weston Dressler, I think a receiver would be skeptical there as well. But Rakeem Cato, I do like as a quarterback. It was an action-packed show.
Yeah.
We did some bragging. We were skeptical. Follow us on Twitter at Rouge Radio or at CFL Fantasy RR. You can follow Daltz at Rouge Daltz or myself at Dave Dawson 7. Fantasy.ca. Also, you can be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes and follow our regular podcast as well, which we will be recording tonight. So good luck in your fantasy football games this weekend. And definitely, if you are running into, as we did mention earlier with Aaron Brown, if you're running into concerns with positions and Keon Raymond, who does play linebacker, he's in a defensive back, and the problem we're running into in our league is if you're short at linebackers and top heavy at defensive backs on your free agent, on your waiver wire, maybe consider a flex position instead of that extra linebacker position. That's also a possibility as well. Anyway, have a good fantasy football weekend, and we'll see you next week.